Hello friends. Parliamentary crisis or CAP or riot in Ukraine? The head of the presidential faction, Servant of People, in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, David Arachamia, said that a big crisis in parliament is approaching. 17 servants of people wants to resign as members of parliament. That is, said Arachamia, we already have 401 people in parliament. We will definitely release another one for medical reasons. There will be 400 people. 226, the minimum number required to make a decision out of 400, is very difficult to collect. To be honest, Arachamia said, in other factions in parties, I also know that there are people who won't leave. We decide that we will not vote for the resignation in order to keep parliament legitimate. It seems that people used to spend a lot of money to get into parliament previous years, but now they will spend it to live. These are political paradoxes of Ukraine. In fact, the parliamentary crisis began a long time ago, and there are several reasons for this. The decline in the role of parliament and deputies against the background of a strengthened president and the increase of social negativity towards deputies, which in condition of war in general, a lot of weapons in the hands, really frightens many deputies. The second, deterioration of relation between the leadership of faction and the office of the president, the line Arachamia Yermak, against the backdrop of office of president's attempt to manage the faction and parliament as a weak-willed herd. Third, but the most important thing is Zaluzhny factor. The situation with expulsion of Mariana Bezugla demonstrated that a rebellion was brewing in the depths of parliament, and a majority for Zaluzhny was gradually beginning to form. But you and I have become accustomed in recent years, when before the war, to living in Zelensky world, and have forgotten a little that the root of the strength of the current president's team lies precisely in the parliament, in the monomajority. It was the monomajority in parliament that allowed Vladimir Zelensky to establish complete control over the government and security forces, which turned into monopower. And the loss of such a monomajority in parliament is fraught with the formation of a new coalition, the election of a new head of parliament, which also replaced the president in critical cases, and a new prime minister. As a result, if the president loses his majority in parliament, he turns into a lame duck and will not be able independently appoint even the Ministry of Defense of International Relations. Therefore, if changes in power begin in Ukraine, they will begin within parliament. In any case, difficult times lie ahead for the president of Ukraine. In the meantime, I wish him health and wisdom, because Vladimir Zelensky turned 46 years old this week. A great age for wise decisions, because you already have experience behind you and you still have life ahead. But the president's birthday was overshadowed by the crash and tragedy of Russian Il-76 near Belgorod, which likely killed more than 60 Ukrainians, military prisoners of the war. It was they who probably should have publicity celebrated his birthday with the president, which is why the version about the deliberate defeat of this plane with the prisoners of the war by Ukrainian air defense forces is extremely untenable. Although the likelihood of an accidental defeat taking into account the comments of the leadership of Ukrainian air defense is high. And there may be several reasons for this. The first reason, the Ukrainian side was not informed about the transportation of prisoners of war, or is deliberately misinformed by the Russian Federation. The second, random operation of the air defense system crew or lack of information in this crew about the transportation of prisoners of war. And also it could be the result of action of the third party aimed at escalating the situation. In any case, this is strategy and a possible violation of the Geneva Conventions requiring international intervention and investigation. Why I told you about the possible actions of the third party? Yes, because now, surprisingly, several coincidences have come together at once. The first, the Western mass media, for example, Bloomberg, actively writes that the Russian Federation is giving signals of readiness for negotiations. And even about his readiness to agree, their readiness to agree that Ukrainians' admissions to NATO in exchange for the Ukrainian recognition of Russian occupied territories. Although Peskov denies this. Second, after a long break, exchanges of prisoners began between the parties, between the countries. This was the second attempt in Belgorod tragedy. That is, some basic level of trust was restored. The third, during his visit to Ukraine, Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, actually received a mandate to negotiate with the Russian Federation on the purchase of gas from Russia and its transit through Ukraine after 2024. For this, Robert even had to give Ukraine compliments about recognizing territorial integrity, supporting the European Union's allocation of 50 billion euros for Ukraine, and allowing Slovak private companies to supply weapons to Ukraine. And the fourth, also important, and general situation at the front between Ukraine and Russia itself is characterized by the absence of attempts at large-scale offensives. The strange offensive of Russian troops near Avdiivka is especially striking. When the success of the units of Russian army which reached the rear of Ukrainian troops through a pipe was not promptly supported and developed by the Russian command. Even Ukrainian media wrote about this. I'm not claiming anything, of course, and this does not yet look like a beginning of political negotiations. But attempts to stabilize the situation are obvious, and all parties have motives for this. Ukraine needs a pause to wait for help from European Union and the United States to pass a new mobilization legislation. Russia needs a pause to before and during the presidential election, March 15-17 this year, so that Russian voters in an atmosphere of stability and calm come to the polling station and vote for the Putin without fear of Ukrainian drones and missiles. The West is in election year. It is generally difficult for the West to act in external arena now. After all, United States elections are already turning into an outright political war. American media write that Donald Trump calls on Republicans not to sign any agreement with Democrats on the Mexican border, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan issue, because this could play into Biden's hands. I told you about a long time ago and few times that the issue is not in Ukraine or even in the border, but in Trump's likely victory in the United States presidential election and the Democrats' attempts to sell Trump, to kick out Trump through the court decisions or criminal investigations. The Trumpians actually make it a condition for unblocking the work of Congress that the Democrats will refuse attempts to remove Trump from the election. In a parallel, the Republican state of Texas expelled United States federal structure from protecting the state's border with Mexico and entrust this to its own security forces. Texas' position was supported by 25 other United States out of 50. The White House is demanding that the border be returned to federal control, and Texas is accusing it of conspiring with the Mexican cartels to organize an illegal migration channel. All this already led to a significant reduction in assistance to Ukraine, and the instability in this matter will continue at least until the end of this year. Thank you, friends, for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and please write down your question. I will be lucky to answer it. Thank you, and see you next Friday. Bye.